The people that want to say all white people have white privilege and that we're all colonialists and that we all have to pay reparations for the sins of our forefathers are now all of a sudden, they're all up in arms about collective punishment here. Thank you for coming to our side on critical race theory finally. Had to take war in the Middle East for it to happen.
Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's on.
We're definitely going to clip that out, right, Sitch? Promise me. That's going to be our show intro from now on. Hassan calling himself a dumb idiot.
There is no bigger fan of Hamas than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe interview, and then you'll ask him to.
No, I actually did interview him a few months ago, and I did actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview, than Israelis, and what he intended to do about it. He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility, which is now this hot phrase in this whole crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a question?
Let me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. I'm not...
How do you feel about leftists all of a sudden being against collective punishment? It's kind of fucking weird, isn't it? We're living in bizarro world now.
It's funny. We've been having our conversation about is socialism individualistic or collectivist?
Oh yeah.
One of the clips we have, or I have, is Hassan complaining about how it's a liberal individualist perspective to have a certain perspective. So he's literally using individualism as like a negative modifier for something.
The people that want to say all white people have white privilege and that we're all colonialists and that we all have to pay reparations for the sins of our forefathers are now all of a sudden they're all up in arms about collective punishment here. It's like you're the ones that brought this on. What the hell are you talking about?
True.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. I'm going to steal it and tweet it out.
It's so insidious. Every time I hear one of them talk about collective punishment, I think, what have you been talking about for the last 8 years?
Mm-hmm.
All this critical race theory is all based on collective punishment. That's what's wrong with it. Thank you for coming to our side on critical race theory finally. Had to take war in the Middle East for it to happen.
I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace. And I think it has fractured society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer for his government. My question for you, I think, is this, is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively
maltreated by Hamas for decades.
I mean, I don't even call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gazans.
This is why I call you a propagandist.
I'm just saying the phraseology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and so on and so on.
Because of Hamas, as soon as a brutal, ruthless gang is no longer the leadership in Hamas, all of that changes. Changes tomorrow.
Get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't disagree with...
That's why they call it the world's largest open-air prison.
Yeah, but Hassan, I don't disagree with you. And I have pointed this out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen, where 1,400 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded, it was reported, and so on. If we can't look at that collectively, with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find that the tribalism on both sides is now so toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors, right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks that precipitated this. And I find that really hard, right? Really hard to accept.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay, here's what I would honestly say about that. Is Israel not allowed to defend itself from the worst terror attack we've seen since 9/11? Is it not allowed to defend itself after 1,400 people in Israel are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are able to defend themselves, as any free democratic country,
that is the Israeli State Department line, that is the IDF's line, that is the line that...
So this is part of like the BS too, is so if Hassan wants to complain about the bombings, killing innocent people, if he wants to complain about cutting off electricity and water to the area, you can complain about all these things, but what is his proposed alternative solution to any of this? Because I've never heard him give one, except capitulation, which is not going to work. Which is, number one, is not going to work. Number two, you're literally insane if you think that would you don't understand anything about human psychology if you think the reaction of a country after the worst terrorist attack they've ever experienced, and probably one of the worst terrorist attacks a first world country has experienced, like probably in the top 10, okay, in terms of like just death count and barbarity of like worst terrorist attacks a first world country has ever experienced, in modern times. If you think that their response to that is just going to be to roll over and capitulate, right? Now, I'm not saying that justifies them to become, horribly brutal, but what is the military response that Hassan would say they should do? Or what should they be doing instead if you think what they're doing is wrong?
It's a great question.
I mean, that's kind of like the difficulty of this is, obviously, I think it's horrible and horrific if innocent Palestinian people are dying, and they're even the ones that are not dying, their entire homes and businesses are being destroyed by the bombings. And as you said, I think they are hostages essentially to Hamas. But it's like, at the end of the day, the kind of sickening reality of the world is that the way our countries exist and the way governments exist is that they're going to protect their own people first before they protect other people. And there's always going to be that like overlap of natural human rights versus you protecting your own. And you have to try to find the line of like, how many people are you willing to kill that are not your people to protect your people? And it's like a super fucked up, difficult moral question that we all have to grapple with in the modern world. And it's completely, and I understand why people don't want to grapple with it, because there's no good answer. It's, as you said, it's a wicked problem. It's a wicked problem that has no good answer to it whatsoever. And I'm just kind of annoyed and sickened by these pathetic loser responses from people like Hassan, who just want like a magical fairy solution where we wave a magic wand and like everything's just better, I guess.
I mean, I have an idea of what they're going to do. I mean, whether or not, I don't know how various people feel about the morality of it.
Oh yeah, no, I know what they're doing and I know what they're going to do, but I'm talking about like, what is the quote more moral, like what would be the Hassan, what is like the moral military
Look,
response that
an
they should be engaged
entirely
in?
different universe has to exist for
Right.
that to take place. Like Hassan lives in a fucking dream world, okay?
Sure.
Like I said, I think the Israeli government probably has decent intelligence on how many people are keeping Hamas in power in Gaza. They basically declared half of the nation a inevitable war zone and said, get out of here if you have the means to get out of here, because we're going to go through. And if it's 500 guys, we're going to round those guys up and incarcerate them. I feel like that's incarcerate or kill them. And I feel like that's what's going to happen. I think that's what they're preparing for. I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
So. No, I agree. And I'm not. I don't think. I mean, it would depend on how effective they are. I don't think Gaza is going to be under its own rule after this.
It might be. Means. I don't know. They had a bunch of potential leaders step up in Iraq. That's the thing. The population.
No, I'm not saying forever. I'm just saying Israel's going to take control of Gaza. For how long, I don't know the answer. But
look, you can't just say, "Okay, you're a democracy now."
Obviously,
here are the democratic institutions. Start voting. Like people are very habitual, right? They live in a society. I don't know. I've never been to Gaza. I don't know what it's like. I have read a bunch of books on places that are these third world nations where just basically everything runs off of bribes and patronage with your neighbors, that kind of thing. Like the police are all corrupt. If you get pulled over, you got to have bribe money to get out of it. They'll shake you down for anything. If you're a local business owner, expect to be paying a large portion of your business to the local secure authorities to basically keep the criminals from raiding you nightly, that kind of stuff. So just we in the West were totally spoiled by this idea that, oh, the police aren't corrupt. Oh, if we have a problem, we can go to a judge and they'll try and at least be fair and impartial. Look, I'm not Pollyanna about the judicial system. Obviously, it ranges by how much money you have, how much access to legal services you have, but at least we have some semblance of order here and that sort of thing. I don't know. The problem is going to be how do you build those institutions? I mean, we're going to replace. Look, there's like 500 guys that are controlling Hamas, and once those 500 guys go, I mean, are there another 500 guys who would like to be in their position? Probably. They probably just take over, start doing what those other people were doing, right? Look, the guy who was shaking down the local businessman for bribes once a week is dead now. But hey, I could just go shake down the local businessman and take his place, right? And everything's exactly the same. This local business guy still needs someone to protect him from other people who will take advantage of him, right? I'm going to be that guy. What changes? Nothing.
True.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if the situation, they're going to take out the 500 guys and 500 other guys are going to take their place.
That's why I'm saying I think
500 other guys are already waiting to take their place.
And there are other groups besides Hamas, and that they think the group that launched the rocket that blew up the hospital wasn't even Hamas; it was some other group.
Okay, so you've got
other groups, right? But that's why I'm saying
you've got 4 or 5 criminal gangs that are.
Yeah, but Israel's not stupid. Okay, that's why I'm saying I think they're gonna once they do move troops in, I think they're going to take over Gaza. And the question is how long? What is that going to look like?
They're going to be responsible for security. They're going to do the exact same thing we did in Iraq. They're basically going to say, look, we're the police now.
Right.
Good luck with that. Didn't go well for us either. Look, I don't know how, like, nobody in Los Angeles would stand for the Iraqi military being the police force in Los Angeles. you watch a bunch of hippies in Los Angeles turn into soldier of fortune pretty quick if that happened.
everyone.
Sam, let me ask you this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves? If their mission now is to get rid of Hamas, a terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure. And this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's on.
We're definitely going to clip that out, right, Sitch? Promise me. That's going to be our show intro from now on. Hassan calling himself a dumb idiot.
There's a longer clip of him just saying like how he and other Twitch streamers are idiots. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
People shouldn't even listen to him. And it's like, okay, you're just, it's really disgusting because he's lying when he says that, because he doesn't actually think he's an idiot, and he thinks that
he thinks he's a genius.
Insight into the world,
I usually have a policy of not covering breaking news, and sometimes that policy is violated. But
sometimes. Part of the problem here is like we're talking about incentives and disincentives. Hassan is incentivized to be as shitty as possible. He is 100% incentivized to cover breaking news. He's 100% incentivized to cover it in the worst way possible, to be audience captured, et cetera, et cetera. He will not be penalized for his mistake about the hospital. He will not be penalized for any of his dog shit takes on Israel. So he will only grow from this interview. He will only grow from all the horrific propaganda he has been spewing relating to this circumstance, to this incident. And the only thing I can hope is that broadly on the left, that the left, the older people on the left, the non-leftist socialist types, are just looking at the insanity they're seeing in these Ivy League schools and the insanity they're seeing from some of the BLM members and on the internet. And they're realizing that they're basically have made a bed with racist psychopaths.
Yeah.
And that they're not aligned.
That's our coalition.
Yeah, that's your coalition.
But ultimately, I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job than most other news outlets in general. So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment.
I don't know if Hassan actually, he says zero people, but does Hassan think Israel has a right to defend itself? I mean, Hassan famously said that America deserved 9/11. Okay, that's what Hassan said. And he never backtracked that. I want to ask Hassan, does Hassan think Israel deserved October 7th?
I think he does.
Okay, so then how can he say that the zero people think they have a right to defend themselves? Because if you say they deserve it, I mean, then they don't have a right to defend themselves, right?
The clip he played about the open air prison. Look, he wants Israel to roll over and take it. He does.
Yeah.
He's like, Israel created this problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian territory in violation of the international law, settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing there and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians.
So, as I said earlier in the stream, I completely don't agree with the settlers in the West Bank, and I think Israel should forcibly remove them all. And I generally think what they're doing is just incredibly immoral. And Israel needs to incentivize peaceful behavior from the government in the West Bank. And so this is completely going counter to peace efforts. And I've said all that stuff. Okay. That being said, anyone that brings up what's happening with settlers in the West Bank to explain or justify what's going on in Gaza is insanely stupid and completely dishonest, as Hassan is doing right now, because he's going through the whole list of, oh, look at what's going on in the West Bank. West Bank's a different government. Okay, it's essentially a different country. There's not settlers in Gaza. Israel pulled the settlers out of Gaza. Just as I said that Israel is incentivizing bad behavior by allowing people to settle in West Bank, Hamas incentivized all the worst behavior from Israel, because when Israel actually did the thing they wanted, actually gave the people in Gaza the reins of power, actually pulled out all the settlers from Gaza, what did they do? They elected Hamas and started attacking Israel with rockets and suicide bombs and all sorts of other fucked up shit.
Right.
Okay, so for Hassan to bring this up, the settlers in the West Bank, as if that justifies Hamas's action in Gaza, is absurd.
He said 51 Palestinians were killed, but he's doing a long dance around. Like, well, I hear 51 Palestinians were killed, and I think, well, how? What happened?
He always does this long. He always does this nonsensical dance where the way he describes information is from this completely one-sided view that Israel is just the evil colonialist empire, and all the Palestinians are these like innocent
Just
lambs,
innocent
that were forced into doing horrific things because of their conditions. Whenever he would bring up some incident, when I look into it, say, oh, this person was killed by IDF snipers or whatever, it'd be like, oh, well, that's because that person was like fucking around with the border gate, which they tell you not to do or they'll shoot you. And then someone does it and then they get shot and then you act surprised.
Right.
It's like, it's like when you resist arrest and the police beat you up and then you act surprised that you got beaten up by the police after you resisted arrest, right? Or get shot or something.
Yeah, he makes it sound like it's a Hunger Games. Israel shows up in the morning and they're like, give us 51 children.
Yeah, right. Right. No, he acts like that the IDF just puts a bunch of snipers on a hilltop and they're just playing like Duck Hunter with the Palestinian lives just for like the lulz.
Yeah. Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.